It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
And welcome to Third Down Gamble. Don Charbin here along with Heath Graham as we get together. Season is upon us, but sadly we've got some news coming out of Chicago that kind of caught everybody off guard.
News that broke yesterday is that Chase Stiegel, a 20-year-old son of Milt Stiegel and his wife Darlene, passed away suddenly at DePaul University. Our thoughts go out to the Stiegel family. Milt is very much a family man. We know this is a big loss for him and his family, and I believe the entire fandom of the CFL, our hearts are with the Stiegel family right now.
Absolutely. Far too young. It came out of literally nowhere. To find him in his dorm like that, got to be devastating for the Stiegels. It's a real tragedy. Our condolences obviously go out to Milt and his wife. The CFL last year put back more than $4.5 million in amateur football. That is something that rarely gets discussed. It's also something that I think the CFL is finally getting better at doing. And you look at the teams across the way, each one sort of did it in different ways, but it all nets the same result where the investment will reap tremendous rewards.
This is something that we have been trumpeting since the beginning of this podcast, that the CFL needed to do a better job at engaging the youth and junior football programs across the country. Fantastic to see this coming to fruition. We know that there have been teams that have done little bits here and there. One thing that has always irked me was that in junior football, flag football programs, the NFL and the NFL team names and logos are so prominent across Canada. And it's time for the CFL to step up and start to take a bit of that shine as well, because I think this is the way that you build connections with youth. You get them excited about the teams, and it's a great way for the CFL and these teams to give back to the community.
Those types of connections, you have to start young. I remember as a little kid, I could go to the catalog and I could order CFL, not jerseys, but replicas. And that really meant a lot to me, to have that sort of extra connection. The CFL is starting to recognize this, and especially given the political climate that we're in, there is an opportunity to be seized. And if you saw the First Minister's conference coming out of Saskatchewan in the last week, not that I want to get deep into politics, but that united front about Canada matters, that's what the CFL, I think, really has to play up a little bit better, not at the expense of their American players, as we discussed before, but in context of that we have something here that we have that is great.
It is. And you look at what some of these teams are doing. We'll continue on with Saskatchewan here. You mentioned Saskatoon. So the Saskatchewan Roughriders have a Grow the Game initiative that really focuses on the grassroots and providing the game of football to non-traditional football communities and demographics. So that's inner city, that's northern communities, that's spread across the province. Winnipeg as well. 800 participants in the W Football Academy. They offer free football for inner city youth. The Calgary Stampeders also looking at hosting junior stamps camps. So again, it's providing that opportunity for people that don't necessarily have the means to participate in junior football. They're getting that opportunity because of the CFL and because of these organizations. And we could go across all 9 teams. They're doing some amazing things in every city across the CFL.
And when we speak of youth, it's not just young boys, it's young girls as well. They're getting every opportunity, and that's really important because your demographics are, you have to bring everybody along for the ride. And if you can get more participants, male or female, involved, it just betters the game in the long run. You get more fans, you get more sponsorships because some of these people become corporates. You just better yourselves.
And that's something that the Bombers have really done well over the last several years, as well as they've introduced some I can't remember the name of the program, but learning football that really helps engage women in learning the game of football. They get them down on the field. They have players and coaches out there teaching them the ins and outs of the game. And you're right. It's not just from a playing perspective. These are generally more adult women participating in this, but they're learning. Maybe they've got kids that want to get into junior football. It allows them a safe environment to learn about the game so that when the kids are participating, they've got a better understanding of what's happening on the field. They learn about coaches, they learn about strategy, and it just continues to introduce new fans to the game. And that's something that we've really talked about the league needing to strive for, and they're making some inroads.
And if you've got the opportunity, seize it. Carpe diem, as they say, seize the day. Go after it, make it happen. Their revenue streams are getting better. The league is growing. Listening to Jeff Creever talking about how sponsorships are growing, how the overall game is getting more viewers. It's all that part of potential that you see happening in front of you that you latch onto and you say, look, we've got to do this so that we build for not just tomorrow, but for a 20 tomorrows ahead, where these youth will be coming up into our seats or onto our field and supporting this game.
The preseason games have wrapped up and teams have trimmed down to their final rosters and practice rosters. There's been a lot of big names floating around out there that are now free agents. What's been the biggest surprise to you come cut down day?
I think the biggest surprise out of all of these cut downs are found in the East. I was shocked at the Toronto Argonauts and what they did. Kadeem Carey was released. Cameron Dukes was also released, and we'll get more into him. But Ciante Evans, who is a veteran of this league, he didn't make it with that football team either. Was that, in each case, a salary cut, especially in Kadeem Carey's, because he was making a little bit extra? But for Cameron Dukes, who showed up well in that preseason game against Hamilton, and given that he had led the team in the previous season while Chad Kelly was on the sideline, I'm surprised that he's no longer there. Now, was it a case where maybe Cameron Duke said, look, I don't see myself as being part of the starting lineup here. Maybe let me go and move on. I doubt that happened, but anything is possible because a player's sort of shelf life is only so much.
I'm going to wager that Nick Arbuckle's performance in the Grey Cup had a bit to do with the decision to cut Cameron Dukes loose. We know Chad Kelly, when healthy, is the number one guy in Toronto. The battle was for that second role. Now you've got the reigning Grey Cup MVP as your number two, and that's not a bad spot to fall back on. Unfortunately for Cameron Dukes, he's odd man out. You mentioned Kadeem Carey. There's some big name running backs in the East. If you want to continue with that, the Argonauts also had Kevin Brown, formerly of the Edmonton Elks, that they had signed. You've got Walter Fletcher now released as well. Those are big time running backs. And I guess we talk about this every season with free agency, with these cut down days. There's a price tag for experience. And sometimes you've got younger players that are hungry in some of these positions that you can get for a much lower price. And I believe that's what's happening with some of these teams in the East, is they are feeling confident about the young running backs coming up. And you've got some well-seasoned and very valuable running backs now looking for work.
In the case in Montreal of Walter Fletcher, it seems as though Danny Machocha sort of indicated strongly that the reason why Fletcher was let go wasn't his ability to move the ball up the field. It was because he wasn't there to block as well as the other backs that they had seen in camp. And with Sean Thomas Erlington, who is actually a very good blocker and a Canadian, that's a ratio buster in a sense. That means that Fletcher became expendable. It will be interesting to find out if in some near date that if any one of those three that we just mentioned, or four that we just mentioned, get somewhere. I imagine Ciante Evans, I don't know that there's a scenario unless injuries really merit it, but for Cameron Dukes, quarterback rooms could change after week one. You could see Kadeem Carey maybe wind up somewhere. Definitely injuries would play into that. Would Calgary be a fit? Dedrick Mills is probably not that thrilled about that idea. But then you've got Kevin Brown, who showed up in Edmonton and then looked like he was going to be something in Toronto. A lot of times, though, when it comes to running backs, and as Machocha said, it's great that you can run. It's great you can catch out of the backfield. But if you're not protecting the quarterback, that's huge.
Especially for the Alouettes this year that have Davis Alexander, who is a young quarterback with not a lot of starts under his belt. You want to make sure that you've got that running back that can chip that blitzer and keep him upright. It's a very important aspect of the game, especially for a young quarterback to get comfortable. That's where Walter Fletcher gets cut. Cameron Dukes, I think, would be an interesting fit for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, potentially. We've got Zach Claris on his 1-game suspension. They've got Terry Wilson and Chris Streveler in that room. I don't know if we're going to see much more out of Chris Streveler than what we have seen over the past few seasons. I don't feel confident with him as the number one guy should something happen to Zach Claris. Cameron Dukes might be somebody that fits into that system well. I think the value of Chris Streveler is in the locker room. He's a glue guy. That's an important role as well. But you've got a quarterback north of 35 years old as your number one guy right now. You've got to make sure that you've got somebody solid behind him. Wilson didn't show a lot in those preseason games to put me at ease for him to be the next guy either. And this would be a situation where they might have to have a look.
It could be. They've actually got 4 quarterbacks that they've hung on to in Winnipeg. One's on the practice roster. But yeah, Cameron Dukes would be somebody I think the Blue Bombers would be interested in at least giving a chance and seeing what he can do. The other team that may be looking at him could be the BC Lions or the Calgary Stampeders. There's 2 opportunities right there. I don't know that in Saskatchewan you're going to see it. Trevor Harris, if he stays healthy, will be the starter. The backup, that one is still, as far as I'm concerned, the jury is out. I know that Jake Mayer is supposed to be up higher because of his experience and everything like that, but he didn't show out in the preseason, and Jack Cohn did. And Jack Cohn has also been with the Rough Riders a little bit longer. I'm kind of still thinking that Jack Cohn would be the backup, and that's how the Rider pecking order would go. We'll see. It was so funny to me. We've heard this commentary about Jake Mayer and how terrible everything was in Calgary, the way he played, et cetera, et cetera. Yet when he came to Saskatchewan, no one seemed to mention that he had his struggles. What changed? Now to my mind, if he's on an upward trajectory, he's got to find something quick to get going because he hasn't shown out much. Could Cameron Dukes be brought into Saskatchewan, maybe to rock that boat a little bit further? It's hard to say. I doubt it, but I agree with you. I think Winnipeg would be the easiest landing spot. Kadeem Carey, Calgary, just logically, I think that would be a place. And Kevin Brown, would he try Edmonton again? But they've got a great back there already.
I think that would be a tough one for him. The important thing right now for these players is to stay in shape, stay healthy, and have their agents keep those lines of communication open. Teams are pretty set right now. They've done their cut downs. This is what they want to move into week 1 with. Injuries can happen quickly. You're a phone call away. They've been through a training camp and preseason game, so you know they're game ready. It's a matter of learning a system. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these big names back over the next couple of weeks. If they stretch longer than that, it's going to be a bit harder because now you've got your practice roster guys that are continuing to show out in practice every day, and coaching staffs and front offices get more comfortable with what they have waiting in the wings. But these next couple of weeks are going to be key to see if these guys can crack a lineup.
And the Stampeders, just prior to all of this news about other players being released, had released receiver Cam Eccles, who had been with the team the previous season, had put up some decent numbers, and now he is gone. There's a huge change going on with the Stampeders. You could argue that lots has to change because the lineup that you were putting out there wasn't doing it for you. If you're going to think in that term, then yeah, you're going to see a lot of new faces in Calgary. In fact, Dave Dickinson has come out and said that his defense could be brand new, that there may not be an incumbent on the field on opening night.
A lot, again, it comes down to the price tag for some of these guys as well, where you've got to bring that youth movement in to keep everybody economically viable. You look at another name, Alexander Hollins, almost 1,000-yard receiver last season, gets cut by the Edmonton Elks. I know he struggled in the second half of last season. He came out red hot at the beginning of the year. Things maybe changed a little bit with the quarterback change in BC midway through when Nathan Rourke took over that team. It looked like he was going to get a fresh start with the Edmonton Elks, especially with the departure of their receiver, Eugene Lewis. This was a great opportunity, I thought, for Hollins to jump in there and take some valuable plays in that Edmonton offense. So a bit surprised to see him go. Not sure exactly what happened in camp that led to that release, but another big name that's going to be out there.
Going back to the Toronto Argonauts, of course, with Cameron Dukes not in the room, and now that Jared Dagey seems to have moved into his slot, there's still some questions as to whether or not Chad Kelly actually starts the season as the opening day starter in Montreal against the Alouettes. Though he is practicing, I don't know that he has the confidence that everything is structurally sound in that leg the way he would like it to be. And B, that the doctors are saying that, yeah, you could take a hit and it's going to be okay. There's a lot of question marks, and I think the longer he gets to heal up, then the better it is for him. And the Argos, again, sort of where they were last year at this time, starting without their number one.
It was a pretty devastating leg injury that Chad Kelly suffered last year. And with the prognosis of those kinds of fractures, it's a bit surprising to see him back and ready to go, or almost ready to go. If I'm the Argonauts, I'm maybe a little bit hesitant to get him into that week one lineup as the number one guy. We saw them excel last year, even with Chad Kelly missing the first 9 games of the season due to suspension. They managed to carry through around 500 when Chad Kelly came back, and that was the best case scenario for them. I don't see a need to rush him back in this situation. They've proven that they can win without him. They do show that they're a better team with him. Absolutely. He's the most outstanding player in this league. You want that star player to play as many games as possible, and you don't want to put him at risk week one if he is not 100% confident and ready to go.
For Ryan Dinwiddie, who had to deal with a lot last year, you wonder how much magic is still left in those cards that he's using. He's been asked a lot to sort of find his way through not only Chad Kelly being gone for the beginning of the season, but also gone for the Grey Cup. So he has to find another quarterback to make things happen there. And you look at his situation, his defense has been gutted. The Edmonton Elks came knocking and opened up the bank and said, come on over. The Argonauts, they're going to have some struggles coming out of the gate as a result of that. It just takes time for guys to gel. And even though you could have the talent pool, you just haven't had the experience together. If it's Nick Arbuckle for the foreseeable future, the Argos aren't going to be hurt necessarily in offense, but I do wonder if defensively that's going to be a liability until they get themselves sorted out.
That would be my concern as well. I know there's this next man up mantra across the CFL, but that's a lot of experience that went out the door on that defensive line, especially in this offseason. And that's some big shoes to fill. I don't believe that the Argonauts are going to be as strong on defense this year as they were last year. The defense won them a lot of games when Chad Kelly was out of the lineup, and I don't know if they've got that firepower again this time around. Nick Arbuckle needs to play smart like he did in the Grey Cup last year and not try to do too much as well. And that's what we talked about last year with Cameron Dukes, was to play smart, don't make those mistakes, give the rest of the team a chance to rally around you and win. And I think that's what's going to be the key for the Argonauts.
Hi, I'm Dave Naylor, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
Unless you're living under a rock, you know that the World Cup of Soccer is coming to North America in 2026. It's going to directly impact the British Columbia Lions. In fact, it's going to probably impact about 6 weeks in the CFL season, where there are 7 matches already scheduled between June 13th and July 7th of 2026. And that coincides with week 2 to week 5, week 2 to week 6, somewhere in that range. But if they need setup time and tear down time to make the transitions, that could be another bookend of weekends beyond that. The Lions now, do you want to play all your games on the road during that spell? Or do you want to look at a temporary stadium and get at least 1 or 2 home dates in?
I would think the latter. We saw success with the Touchdown Pacific game in Victoria last year. I know it's not a CFL size venue, especially for Western Canada. They had a crowd of just under 15,000, which was a sellout at Victoria's Royal Athletic Park last year for that game. I would imagine maybe 2 home dates in a venue like that and 3 on the road if we're looking at a 5-game schedule. It's not the end of the world, especially if they can continue to have success in their kickoff concert series like they have done over the last few years. We know there's over 50,000 tickets sold for their home opener this year as well. If you can pack BC Place Stadium for that home opener and get some good crowds when you're able to play at BC Place, the gate revenue from those secondary stadiums doesn't hurt quite as much.
Now, the last time the BC Lions had to move out and play somewhere else was when they had renovations at BC Place that kicked them out for a couple of seasons, or half of, let's say, 2011, so 2010 and 2011. And the provincial government funded what was the old Empire Stadium, and they put a temporary stadium in there, and it turned out to be quite a success. This is a different can of worms. This is only for a couple of months, not 2 years, and you've got to have something that's ready viable. You could look at Thunderbird Stadium, which is in the neighborhood. Could it suffice for what you would argue is a CFL crowd? You'd have to have room for 15 to 20,000 minimum, and that is only about a 10,000 seat stadium if you push it.
I guess it comes down to what are they comfortable with adding temporary seating to some of these places. We've seen in Grey Cups past in some of the stadiums like the old Winnipeg Stadium, where they put temporary seating in the end zones that increase capacity by several thousand. If the possibility to do that is there, it's a viable option. Just over a year to figure this out right now. Again, I think that 15,000 is about the number that you want as a minimum for an opportunity to allow the Lions to generate some revenue while they're on the road. I'm sure they'll get some compensation from the World Cup, from hosting the World Cup as well, but it's still not the same as having those fans in the stadium to cheer you on. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. I just don't believe that a 5-game road trip is viable, although it would give them a lot of home games late in the season. If they're making a playoff run, you want to have those games at home. So maybe they're weighing that as a possibility as well.
And they have to be thinking about that. But the other thing, too, is you've got expenses that you have to look at. Let's say they go with temporary stadium. You're going to have to somehow come up with the cash to do that. Now, the Grey Cup made them a ton of money. Do you dip into that pool and use that to build a temporary stadium? You probably have to be looking fairly close to where they are right now. The other equation is, like you say, you move to Kamloops, you move to Kelowna, you move to somewhere else for a couple of games. Do they have the facilities? Major headache. And again, more money has to be tossed in. The idea of being on the road, that means hotels all the time. That means flights all the time. It just, every way you look at it, it's going to wind up costing. So then you got to look at revenue streams and how are you going to make up for that? And that's where I think they're kind of like weighing their options here in terms of what is best so that this hit, which is going to be a hit, doesn't hurt as much.
You mentioned the Thunderbird Stadium where the UBC Thunderbirds play. They have one whole side of the field is essentially a grassy knoll where fans can stand or sit in the grass to watch the game. With that right now, capacity is 10 to maybe 12,000 that you can squeeze in there. And now it's up to the engineers and architects to figure out if temporary seating can be put in place on that one side of the stadium to help boost. I don't imagine a lot of people are going to be happy standing around on a hill to watch CFL football. They're going to want to be able to sit somewhere. So that certainly is a possibility, but some work involved to make that the best option.
The Edmonton Elks brought back Dwayne Mandrusiak, a person who had been with the franchise for 49 years. This will be his 50th, but he had been away from the team for a couple of years. And it's great that they brought back one of their longest standing employees, somebody that was really tied to the team for all these years. The curious thing about this is they've got a photo that they put out that says once a insert word here, always a insert word here, and it is not elk.
There was rumblings last year when Larry Thompson took ownership of this team about a desire to go back to the old moniker. I wish they would put this to bed. I'm happy to see Dwayne Mandrusiak back. He was let go in 2020 after 49 years of service. Wonderful that he gets to come back for his 50th season. I think that is an honor that the organization has bestowed upon him, and well deserved. Bringing that post out and seeing the old name just rekindles this argument that the renaming was a curse, all these sorts of things. And I just think it's time to move on. We're now 4 years into the Edmonton Elks being the CFL franchise. You can go with the legacy of the double E, as Chris Morris has said numerous times as well. That's fine, but they are the Elks. They're going to continue to be the Elks. And I don't think that the league or the Board of Governors is going to approve at this point going back to the old name, nor should they. Let's put it to bed.
I don't think that we're going to see the name revert to what it was. I think it would be a huge mistake for that franchise to do so because of all of the trouble that it would bring with it. It's been a fight between the old guard and the new guard. The new guard said it's time to move on. We have to adopt a name that's more culturally sensitive. Elks is fine. It's great. And it was a name that they had used almost 100 years before as part of the franchise. The other name is not culturally respectful. And that's the problem that is still incumbent upon it. And regardless if you think the team name is something independent of that, which you can't escape it. It's like why Cleveland went to the Guardians. It's the same thing. You can't do this anymore. It's time to move on. And they did it. Just thinking, though, that they're talking internally that they'll use either name interchangeably. I mean, you're still not moving very far forward. And Chris Morris, who's an educator, I would have thought would have got it. But apparently he's still stuck in where he was as a player. And look, times move forward. Teams move forward. This business of the curse, this has nothing to do with the name change. This has everything to do with management and the people that they brought in.
Hopefully this is the last we hear of it. I doubt it is, unfortunately, but I think cooler heads will prevail. More sensible people will be the voice of reason in this, and it will eventually go away.
Well, it will, especially if the team makes the playoffs. Then people will start to quit whining about it. And it's just enough is enough. Instead of looking backwards all the time, why don't you look forward? This team has struggled mightily since the pandemic. When's the last time they won a playoff game? That was under Jason Moss back in 2018. This is everything to do with them not doing it right from the top down. Now, I'm not saying that the board of directors was at fault. You hire people, you trust that they're going to do a job. Some people just aren't the right fit. They struggle with it. Things go wrong. Trouble starts. But to dig yourself out of it sometimes takes effort. The Rough Riders in the 80s went years without making the playoffs. Nobody changed the name there. And no one blamed the name either. So enough. Just grow up. Start focusing on what matters down on the field. Get the talent, coaching, and the management together that promote winning and quit worrying about what the name used to be. If you walk looking backwards enough times, you're going to walk into a parked car.
Third down.
The CFL is about to start in a few hours. Hey, Heath, we haven't talked about this much. 1 through 4 and 1 through 5, East and West. We've had Derek Taylor and Dave Thomas discuss this on a previous podcast that people could have heard earlier, just prior to this one. Your thoughts on this? They struggled with the East. You too?
I did. I believe, and I know I've said it before, but I think parity in this league is the closest we've ever had, and this season is going to prove it, especially in the East. You look at Hamilton missing the playoffs last year, the Ottawa Red Blacks on the upswing making the playoffs and Toronto and Montreal continuing to do what they did, it's going to be very, very tough in the East this year to come out on top. I'm flipping the script from last season, and I have both Levi Mitchell and the Hamilton Tiger Cats winning the East this year with a record of 11-7. Nobody's running away with it. Nobody's going 14-4, 15-3. This is going to be a tight race right down to the wire. And I think Hamilton has added some key pieces that are going to help propel them up the standings and take the crown.
I kind of agree. Although I will not give Hamilton first place. I think that Ottawa is actually the team that's going to break through. But the next 3, 11 wins in the East, 12 wins in the East, that's about as far as it goes. I don't see a team getting beyond that. As Jeff Creever pointed out, 8 teams last year finished with at least 7 wins. That's amazing parity. The East, I think the worst record is probably going to be 8-10. The East is still the dominant division of the two, so their records are going to be inflated a little bit. Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Hamilton. Toronto, I have a major problem with because of the defense. I don't trust it just yet. And Chad Kelly's health. That's another thing. Montreal, it's Davis Alexander. Is he all that they expect him to be? If he is, Montreal and Ottawa are going to be fighting it out. The problem I have with Hamilton is Levi Mitchell had a fantastic year last year. If he's protected, they're going to do it again. But if he's not, and he has to miss any significant time, they're like the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They're going to plummet. And that's where I think them and Toronto could be in a real fight to see who gets that road game in the playoffs to start in the semifinals.
I'm with you record-wise as well. I've got, running through the list, I've got Hamilton 11-7. I've got Ottawa taking the second spot at 10-8. Toronto drops to 9-9, and Montreal at 8-10. And again, you can flip any of these around. It's really tough to call. The reason I've got Montreal slipping all the way to 4th is the untested quarterback, Davis Alexander. Now, he could go off and he could lead them to first place in the East, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least. I just think that it's a tough spot to be in. They do have McLeod Bethel-Thompson as a capable backup as well, but I just see them slipping. And you're right, the Toronto defense gives me some concern, and that's why I've got them slipping to a 500 team. Anybody starts to gel early on in the season and goes on a bit of a run, and they're going to have the advantage in the East. It's going to be a really tight race right down to the end.
Remember about Davis Alexander. He's undefeated as a starter. He went 3-0 last year when he had the chance, when Cody Fajardo was down. Alouette's defense is going to be probably the best in the league. Is there going to be enough offense to help them out? If Tyrese Beverett has another all-star season and that defensive line gives quarterback fits, then the Alouettes are going to be scary. You're right. Davis Alexander, there's going to be a few rookie mistakes in all of this. Take your pick. Don't be wedded to anybody being first or fourth. Just think of the numbers, how tight it's going to be. Because a fumble here, a pick here, anything could really toss this standings around. And who knows? Out west, if listening to Derek and Dave talk about it, there's almost like a 2-tier west. You've got the 3 that are fighting it out for the final playoff spot and the 2 that are going to fight it out for the top playoff spot. Vernon Adams is going to be a huge, how would you describe it? A huge wild card in all of this. If he goes off, the Stampeders are going to be fun to watch. Maybe 5th. Then you've got Edmonton and BC. And here's the question. You got 2 Canadian quarterbacks, Nathan Rourke, who had that Captain Canada year, and Trey Ford, who's now anointed as the starter in Edmonton. Can he put it all together? If he does, then the Lions are going to be chasing the Elks. If he doesn't, then it's the Elks chasing the Lions. And the Lions, their big problems are their offensive line is hurting. David Foucault is not going to be playing for a while. That's an anchor that's gone. Nathan Rourke, new system. Buck Pierce, they don't play the way they used to under Jordan McSimic. That's going to be a big change. That's where those 2 could really be dogfighting it. But I would almost put them as high as 2nd, because here's the rub that I have for you. Consensus seems to be that Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, one of them is going to be in 1st, and it may come down to the last game of the season when they play in Winnipeg. One thing and one thing alone could change all of that, and that is the health of their starting quarterback. If Zach Collaros or if Trevor Harris go down, all bets are off and anybody wins the West.
I agreed. And we've talked about how many starting quarterbacks we've seen over the last few seasons. We're into the close to mid-20s for starting quarterbacks in the CFL. It's tough for a quarterback to play all 18 games. It's near impossible these days, it seems. I've got the Bombers actually slipping in the standings a little bit this year. I do have the same 3 teams making the playoffs as the previous season, but I have the Saskatchewan Roughriders winning the West at 12-6. We've got 11-7 in the East, 12-6 in the West. Nobody's running away this season. I think we will see the resurgence of Nathan Rourke. He's going to bounce back. He's now got a full camp under his belt, and it is his team to run. No more controversy. Buck Pierce is a very quarterback-friendly head coach. He's had years of working in that offense in Winnipeg, both as a position coach and the offensive coordinator. I think he's going to do wonders for Nathan Rourke on that team. I've got the Lions at 10-8. Winnipeg drops to 9-9. I know we've been talking about this for years, but eventually the age factor starts to creep in, as well as the loss of Brandon Alexander and Adam Bighill on that defense. That's a step back defensively. Terrell Ford as well has moved on to Edmonton. So that's some key components of that defense that aren't there anymore. They've made some nice pickups on offense to replace Kenny Lawler moving on and Drew Wolodarski. They've got Jareth Stearns. They've got Dylan Mitchell. They've added some key parts there. Dalton Schoen appears to be healthy to start the season as well. I don't think the struggle's on offense. I think their challenge is defense. So I've got them at 9-9. The Elks, one thing Trey Ford does is find a way to win. He's a gutsy quarterback. I've got them up to 7-11. The Stampeders 5-13. Again, Vernon Adams could go off and have an MOP caliber season. All of a sudden, you flip the script on what's going on in the West as well. I am not etching these in stone. It's hard to even say them out loud because the CFL is so unpredictable. I had to put something down on paper, and you start doing the math of if this team is going to be 12-6, other teams have to have some losses, and where do those come from? And unfortunately, for the Calgary Stampeders, I've got them at the bottom of the league once again.
Winnipeg has Jason Hogan as their offensive coordinator. Now, people were getting upset with Buck Pierce because Winnipeg's total point production went down, but yet Zach Collaros' touchdown pass numbers went way up. Winnipeg is getting older. Again, we talk about that every year. But to be fair, this time, I think they are at the precipice. They're running out of room to not fall over the cliff and have everything go horribly wrong. The Blue Bombers will miss Adam Bighill. I don't care who you are. You cannot replace somebody like that overnight. They're going to miss Terrell Ford, who was a shutdown corner. Yes, Dalton Schoen is going to be back in the lineup, but Kenny Lawler is not. And what did Kenny Lawler do? Free up space for everybody else. He's in Hamilton now. That's why everyone, and you included, are thinking Hamilton could win the East, because if Kenny Lawler is going off, that means the Ticats are going off. I don't know that the Blue Bombers are that strong. The Rough Riders in that preseason game in Winnipeg, when they faced them and they had their starting defensive line, I was stunned to see Zach Collaros out there for 3 series getting beat up, because that Rider defensive line was owning Winnipeg's offensive line. And if that is the case that continues, if Mike Rose has a season that everyone expects, then watch out. That defensive line for Saskatchewan is going to open up a lot of problems for everybody they face, because the more pressure you get up front, the more they feast behind you. Saskatchewan, I don't mind picking first, but it all depends on quarterback play. And if Harris isn't there, do you trust Jake Mayer? I don't. Jack Cohn, he's going to be thrown in with the Wolves. We'll see what happens. Winnipeg, if they go away from Zach Collaros, my goodness, do you want Chris Streveler to be your starting quarterback for the remaining 17 games? BC, Nathan Rourke, they've got Jeremiah Mazzoli behind him. Calgary, it really, really depends on what happens with Vernon Adams Jr. If I went top to bottom, I'd say Saskatchewan. I'll say Winnipeg, but barely. And then I'll pick Edmonton third and BC like right in that fight. And then Calgary, much better than they were the year before, but I don't know. Calgary's probably good for 8 wins. Again, you're looking at a West where the best record maybe gets to 12 and the worst record is flirting between 6 and 8.
Now, I'm not going to go out on a limb here and try to predict what's happening in the playoffs and who's marching on through to the Grey Cup, because I think I've got 8 teams on this list that I could make a reasonable argument for why they're a Grey Cup contender. With all that said, Calgary's probably going to go off and march on through and win the whole thing. And the one team I don't think's got a shot is going to come through. We saw that with the Montreal Alouettes 2 seasons ago, where a lot of people wrote them off and thought they were going to be bottom feeders in this league. They came out with something to prove and won it all at the end of the day. So this is what I love about the league. It's hard to predict, and that parity this year, I wouldn't be surprised if we have 9 teams with a 9-9 record, and it goes into the craziest tiebreaker scenario ever to figure out who's got those playoff spots. It's that close.
Well, let's go to week 1. We are on the cusp of the 2025 CFL season, and it opens with what many believe are the 2 first-place teams in each division, the Ottawa Redblacks and the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The Riders, 2.5 favored at home. Do you trust that? Do you trust Drew Brown and the Redblacks?
I like the way the Red Blacks trended last season, and I'm picking them to go into Saskatchewan and pull off the upset at Mosaic Field. I'm taking the Red Blacks to win outright and obviously to beat that 2.5 point spread.
I'm with you. Coming out west, where the East has feasted, Ottawa to me seems like, and especially with Eugene Lewis there, that's another weapon for Drew Brown. He's got another year under his belt under that offense. I really like what Ottawa's doing. Their defense is getting stronger. The Red Blacks, to me, could be a force, and winning in Saskatchewan wouldn't surprise me. I'm with you on that.
Game number 2 has the defending Grey Cup champs, the Toronto Argonauts, in Montreal to take on the Alouettes, where the Alouettes are a 4.5 point favorite at home, Percival Molson Stadium. Who do you like in this one?
I like the Alouettes at home. The only reason is that I don't trust Toronto's defense yet. If Davis Alexander gets an opportunity to survey the field and do what he wants to do, then the Alouettes are going to take charge. They've got a tremendous receiving core. They've got a pretty good offensive line, so the Alouettes are safe up front. Their defense is super strong, and that's the one thing that kept them in that East final last year, was given all the turnovers that the offense was giving up. The defense kept them in that football game. If Toronto's going to win that game, they're going to have to get those same turnovers, and I don't think you're going to see it twice. The Alouettes will cover.
This is going to be pretty boring if we agree on every single game in the first week of the season, because I also have the Montreal Alouettes winning and covering the 4.5 point spread at home. This is the game that is going to show whether Davis Alexander has what it takes to be the number 1 guy. He's going to be at home against the defending champs, against a team. Yes, it's a reworked defense, but over the last few seasons, the Argos have been notorious for their defense. This is where Davis Alexander needs to prove he's the guy, and I think they pull this one out. Moving
west, we go to the Stampede City, where the Stampeders take on the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Levi Mitchell makes his 2nd trip to Calgary after moving to Hamilton, and the Tiger Cats are 1.5 point favorites in this one. I'm liking the Ticats in this game. They didn't win last year, but it was because they got off to such a slow start in the game. They rallied late, but it just wasn't enough. I don't think twice in a row the Ticats will make those mistakes. And Scott Milanovich wants to get this team off to a good start. They can't go like they did last year. The Stampeders are going to be in tough. This should be a great game, though, because there's going to be a lot of balls flying all over the place.
I'm a bit surprised to see the Tiger Cats only as a 1.5 point favorite in this one. I know it's a road game. That's where this point spread comes into play. I like that the Tiger Cats to go in and win big. I think Levi Mitchell is going to be fired up for this one. He's excited about the additions that have been made to that offense in Hamilton over the offseason, and I think he rallies. Now, the question mark for the Ticats again this year is probably a bit on defense. You've got Vernon Adams Jr., like you said, he's going to be slinging it as well. We might see over 700 total passing yards in this game between these 2 quarterbacks and 5 or 6 touchdowns, but we're probably also going to see a couple of interceptions. That's going to be the difference maker in this one, and I like the Ticats to go in and pull off the road win.
Well, if the Stampeders come out with 12 players that were not on the roster in the final game of the season, or at least not starting the final game of the season last year, That's going to be a lot of assignments they better understand. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of mix-ups. Now, Florian Ormolade, he's going to create havoc. But then you got Julian Hauser on the other side, who left Cowtown and is coming back to play them. Lawler as your deep threat. The Ticats can use him and just take advantage of the inexperience that's going to be in that Calgary secondary. Ticats should easily cover.
Final game of week number 1 has the Edmonton Elks headed to BC to take on the Lions. Snoop Dogg is going to be in the house. It's going to be a loud and full house at BC Place Stadium. The home team are a 5.5-point favorite. Can the Elks do enough to keep this one close?
The Elks traditionally going into BC the last few years have been destroyed. They've been shut out. I don't see that happening this time. Mark Killam, granted, he's a new head coach, but so is the guy on the opposite side of the field. Edmonton, when you've got Trey Ford in that backfield and he creates havoc by just moving side to side, laterally, press the defense, but not necessarily take off. But this is one of those moments where Trey Ford could actually make a name for himself. And if we're thinking that these two are going to be fighting it out for a playoff spot, this is massive right now.
It is. I do like the Lions at home by a touchdown, so I think they're going to cover the 5.5. You talk about Trey Ford reminding you of Doug Flutie. We got a guy on the other side of the ball as well in Nathan Rourke that has done some amazing Flutie-like things in his 2022 season. And the big question is, can he get back there or at least close to that? And this is his chance to have his breakout year, a full year at the helm for the BC Lions. I like what he's going to do. I think that the Lions come out firing. They're going to be really pumped up with that home crowd behind them, and they will win this one by about a touchdown.
As much as it pains me to say this, I trust the Lions enough to cover, but don't be shocked if the Elks not only get inside that 5.5, but sneak one out at the end. 2025 season is finally here.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit CFL.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.